Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
This is the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast. Catch us live weekdays at 7 a.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay or Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Listen on demand wherever you get your podcasts or watch us live on YouTube.
Joining us now to get started, she waltzed in holiday dress. I mean, in red. How many parties do you have tonight?
Oh my goodness!
Only one. Only one.
Just one party tonight.
Yes.
Joining us, Rebecca Patterson, iconic at J.P. Morgan, of course, her tour of duty at Bridgewater. You came in and you whispered to Paul. You said, "Strong dollar." How strong a dollar?
Well, a lot stronger than consensus has for next year. So most of the big investment banks are looking for weakness in the dollar, especially in the second half of the year. I don't see it. You've got a divergence in interest rates, even though that's somewhat priced in, but it's going to favor the dollar. You have much stronger growth in the U.S., which I think will continue to bring capital to the U.S., which will help the dollar. And in a case where President-elect Trump decides to go hardcore on the tariffs, we've seen historically that tends to be a positive for the dollar and weakness in currencies overseas. So the only case where I think the dollar weakens next year is if the U.S. moderates while the rest of the world is gaining momentum, which moves capital overseas. Possible, but I just don't think the probability is as high as what consensus is suggesting.
So I'm asking you for a friend here. Could the euro get to parity?
I think the euro is likely to break through parity next year.
Parity.
So
wow.
there you
Okay.
go. I'm
Yep.
putting it out there.
All right. I mean, for our friends that like to go to Rome and Paris, Lisa, that's a good thing. For those of us who stay in New Jersey, not so much of a thing. All right. Talk to us about the equity markets. I've heard so much discussion over the past month or two about international investors coming to the U.S. market. Is this activity unusual? Is it typical? What do you make of it?
I mean, the risk that I think a lot of people are pointing out is that the U.S. equity market, relative to the rest of the world, has gotten very expensive and heavily owned by foreign investors, international investors, and domestic investors. And so it feels like a drumbeat now of calls that the U.S. is in a bubble. The U.S. could slow down next year. We'll get money going overseas because the valuations are much better. And the thing I always come back to is valuations matter but aren't sufficient. You need a catalyst.
Well, yeah.
And that's what I keep looking for. Does China pull out all the stops and help the consumer? Does Germany get rid of the debt brake, and is that stimulus sufficient? I'm skeptical it is, which makes me think the U.S. can stay the outperformer next year in terms of equities. But I'm watching those risks given where we are.
Well, let's fold the correlated mess. I put out a tweet here. We got DXY through 107. I got 10-year real yield out to 2.03%. To me, the single two sentences of the weekend was a guy named Sam Rowe, always suspect. Sam Rowe channeling Liz Ann Saunders and Kevin Gordon and Charles Schwab on a beautiful scatterdot study that says it's not correlated. You can't take 1 year forward PE multiples like Barron's 101 and say mark it up or mark it down. What signals do you take from the equity market that bring you over to bonds, that bring you over to foreign exchange?
That's a great question. So it's to me, there's a chicken and egg situation here.
Better said.
Does the equity market drive the currency? Does the currency drive the equity market and pull in bonds too? They all influence each other, and often it's which one is dominant will be driving, which one is having the bigger move, the greater momentum. So you can see a big move in bonds. If we have a big rise in the 10-year yield that's not purely driven by growth, that can pull equities lower. But we can also see if there's growth optimism about U.S. exceptionalism, the 10-year can go up and stocks go up with it. And the dollar goes up, everything goes up.
You said earlier there's a bubble. I don't see a bubble. Is there a bubble?
No, I did not say there's a bubble. I said there is a growing...
Monday morning. I'm trying to wake people up.
I want to be clear what I'm saying. The U.S. market is expensive if you look at a 12-month forward price earnings ratio, if you look at EPS growth priced in for next year for U.S. stocks, if you look at ownership. But we know from history, to your point, Tom, that what happened this year has zero correlation with what happens next year. So the market could continue to rise if we have decent growth in the U.S. and there aren't a lot of alternatives for your money. And I think that scenario is probably the most likely one.
How about, we had the election last month here, big changes coming starting in January of 2025 here in U.S. policy. Did you change your outlook at all, or your allocation, or where you want to, find risk in the marketplace?
Yeah, the one thing that I think investors should be really thinking about are scenarios, because we simply don't know yet what President-elect Trump and his administration are going to do in terms of sequencing and size. So when do tariffs happen, and how big are they? What kind of deportation do we see? Those are big downside risks, in my opinion, for the equity market. I don't think they're being priced in right now, but we don't know. And so if you don't know what's going to happen, you have a wider cone of outcomes, you need to be having some hedges in your portfolio. So fine, have fun with financials that are going to benefit from deregulation and growth. Have fun with your digital asset related assets, so to speak, but then make sure you have a few defensive positions as well in case some of these negatives become reality. So I would look overseas at the UK. I would look overseas possibly at Switzerland. Within the United States, I think things like energy, healthcare, utilities can play a role, not in large size, but some pieces of it, just to give you those hedges for those less friendly scenarios.
Our viewers or listeners have a collective memory of President Trump railing against a strong dollar. Everything you said is against the genetic structure of Donald Trump. He wants a weak dollar to keep U.S. exports going. Are you suggesting that's done?
Trump has gotten a little more balanced in his currency comments over the last few months, and certainly the Treasury Secretary nominee, Scott Bessent, is also more balanced in terms of his view on the dollar. So if the dollar is very strong and we're seeing that hurt exporters in the data, of course we're going to get some tweets or posts or whatever the president-elect is into that day. But what can he actually do about it? I don't think we have a new Plaza Accord or a Mar-a-Lago Accord. I don't think that's in the cards.
What's the golf course in Scotland he has? Turnberry?
Turnberry.
A Turnberry Accord.
A Turnberry Accord.
Great. Everybody wears kilt.
Yeah.
I can see President-elect in a kilt.
Sure. Talk to us about avocados. What do we need to know?
Okay, so I have been...
What?
Yes, we're talking
It's
about
a thing?
avocados. So
That was a Segui.
Well, watch this one, Tom.
It
Watch
was a
this one.
surveillance Segui. Go.
Exactly.
So you think about risks in the next year, and one risk that I think is on people's radar screens, but maybe not enough, is a resurgence of inflation. And one area I think you want to watch is food inflation. U.S. farmers are struggling right now. They can't get enough workers. And 70% of workers in U.S. farming are immigrants. About half of those are illegal immigrants. If you reduce the workers, you can't get the crops out of the ground, prices go up, profits go down. In addition to that, though, the tariffs are a big hit on U.S. farmers. In 2018-19, that year period alone, they lost $27 billion in export revenue. Now, last time, Trump bailed them out. They got over $80 billion in government subsidies. Yeah. This time, they don't have as much free money flowing to hand out. So why do avocados come in the mix? Because 90% of American avocados come from Mexico. And if we don't have people to get those avocados out of the ground here in California, and the tariffs on Mexico are causing some retaliation, avocados are going to become a luxury good. I wrote about it in the New York Times this past week.
I saw it, but Paul, help me here. We didn't know what an avocado was until what, 15 years ago?
The guacamole, the kids with the guac.
It was the guac that,
If you want to
now
see
it's like a
angry
mainstay.
Americans, I mean, double the price of guac for Super Bowl, you will have angry voters.
See, I told you.
Each avocado contains 58 milligrams of magnesium.
Sure.
Is there anything bad about avocados? Lisa, come on, Lisa. Get with it.
It's a healthy fat. It's very good for you.
How do you buy avocados? Do you buy them by the bushel at Costco?
Yes, I sure do.
Do you really?
I do. I buy the big bag. They come a little bit hard, so you got to kind of put them in the cabinet to let them ripen a little bit. But that's the way to do it.
The budget deficit has widened. This is from your op-ed, isn't it? From 3.9% of gross domestic product in 2018 to 6.4% today, suggesting that maybe the U.S. government will not have the same capability to support farmers in such a scenario?
I mean, they're going to feel pressure to do that for sure. Farms are all across the country, our amber waves of grain, right? So they're going to be pressure, but are they going to find the money? It's going to be harder to find the money this time. Is Elon going to let them have the money?
Right.
Where's the best avocado restaurant in New York City? I have a massive craving right now.
Rosa Mexicano,
Yeah.
tabletop guacamole. They come and make it in front of you, and you can customize it. That's
Good
still my
margaritas.
go-to.
Yep, very good. See?
I'm
There's an
now
answer.
It's a font of wisdom.
I'm now in holiday mode. You just
Holiday.
officially got me there.
Exactly.
Rebecca Patterson, thank you so much for joining us.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast. Catch us live weekday afternoons from 7 to 10 a.m. Eastern. Listen on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Or watch us live on YouTube.
Henrietta Treyz joins us right now with Veda Partners. She's just been absolutely fabulous. Henrietta, there's really only one question. Are there Republican senators that are going to push against their president? There was confusion over the weekend.
I think there's a lot of things to push back against incoming President Trump over, some of the nominees that he's picked, whether it's Hegseth or RFK Jr. You're starting to see it in individual little baskets. We're dealing with the government funding bill that has not been released yet because it continues and increases federal spending and creates a problem with 80 to 150 House Republican members. So I think they're picking and choosing which areas they want to fight the president over.
So let's go to that issue here. I'm always, when people talk about funding the government and shutdowns, it kind of gets my attention here. Just walk us through the timeline about what our Congress is going to be doing over the next several weeks as it relates to keeping this government open.
Yeah, great question. Right now, they're going to vote on a National Defense Authorization Act, which increases federal spending for that sector by 1% to $884 billion, if I'm not mistaken. It includes, a 14% uptick for junior enlisted servicemen, and that's the package that they'll pass this week while we wait to release the government funding bill, which will similarly increase federal spending by $100 billion, roughly, just to get us into March. So we're kind of trying to clear the decks, but they're not clearing it for any kind of long duration. It's just until about March 14th of 2025, which means almost as soon as we pass this hurdle to keep the government open, we're going to be facing another shutdown early next year, which very likely could get in the way of the Republican agenda around this first smaller reconciliation bill on immigration, defense, and the border. And that's going to be the story of next year.
Right.
It's just starts.
Well, to the mystery of what senators going to do with the different controversial cabinet picks, is the Tea Party-ish type of the House going to go against their president on March 14th?
I think this is the real issue that we have, which is Speaker Johnson has a 0 vote margin until April, when he's going to have a whopping 2 vote margin. So House Republicans lost seats last election cycle, which is something that doesn't get, I think, reported enough. And that's going to be even more difficult for Speaker Johnson to keep his job and to keep the government open into next year. To answer your question directly, absolutely. I think that the Republicans in the next CR will probably lose 150 House Republican members when they go to keep the government open under President Trump in 2025.
Wow. All right.
Wow.
So I don't know how that's going to play out. Henrietta, talk to us, I guess, maybe a little bit more immediate in the calendar is some of these nominations that still have to go through congressional approval. Where are we with some of the Mr. Hegseth, Tulsi Gabbard, some of the more controversial ones? What do we know now?
I mean, right now we're doing effectively a pretty serious media lobbying campaign with Hegseth standing next to J.D. Vance and President-elect Trump at an Army-Navy game, obviously trying to project physically that they are all aligned and on board and encouraging members of the Senate Republican Conference to get on board with passing those members. I think what's going to happen is we're going to see some of these folks get full court press and President Trump put his weight behind it and say, pass this, give me this nominee. But others, a la Tulsi Gabbard, for example, are going to have a much more difficult time.
Right.
I keep my eye on the prize. Obviously, I cover macroeconomic policy, so I don't really care about some of those agencies. I really want to see Scott Bessent of the world, Jamison Greer, USTR. Those are much more important to me. And I think those folks are very likely to get through. Those are the ones who will be putting tariffs on next year. I think that's the prize.
And now, folks, the Civics dumb question of the week. Let's get it out of the way early here on a Monday. Henrietta Treyz, with the senators vote, are their votes visible, or are they like by a ballot box where they're secret?
Oh, no, absolutely visible. You can watch this all on C-SPAN. It's great family fun. Highly recommended.
Debt ceiling.
She's such a nerd.
I know. Debt ceiling, deficits. I mean, we've got the clock here in Manhattan that shows us the deficits. Does anybody care in Washington, D.C.? Should they care?
Oh, they talk about caring, for sure. Everybody's against deficits, that's for sure. But you're not against specific spending cuts. You're not for specific spending cuts. It's much easier to be against things than for them. So while we talk about, being against federal spending, let's be mindful that we have to increase the debt ceiling next year. And Lindsey Graham, the incoming Senate Budget Committee chairman, notified us last week that the debt ceiling, which could pass on party lines with just Republican support and a reconciliation bill, will instead go through regular order. And that is acknowledgement that they will not be cutting federal spending next year. It is far too difficult a task, especially when you have a 0-seat margin in the House and only 3 seats in the Senate.
How about on the tax front here? How do we think this is going to play out?
On the tax front, I think it's clear from incoming leader Thune's agenda that we will not get a tax bill until December of 2025. We are going to have a massive fight over, the SALT deduction, over repealing the IRA tax credits for burgeoning industries in clean energy, solar, wind, batteries, et cetera. It's popular to say that we're going to repeal the electric vehicles tax credit, for example, but that's about $120 billion in the broader IRA, which has ballooned, as you know, from a bill that they expected to be about $200 billion in private sector uptake to $780 billion, because you've grown these industries, some up in Boston, Texas, Ohio, North Dakota, South Dakota. It's very bipartisan and disproportionately in red states. About 70% of that funding is red states.
What's interesting here, Henrietta, and I've got to squeeze this in, the SALT tax is just called... Is a stereotype that it's just about Democratic states, or can Mr. Trump get pressure on the SALT tax from Republican states?
That's a great question. As you know, I live down here in Louisiana. There are beautiful, nice streets down here where people are paying, exorbitant property taxes and mortgages. That's in Texas. That's in every state in our great nation. There's big homes that people want this deduction for. So I think a lot of it weighs on the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, California Republican contingent. And the reason that's easy is because those are seats that President-elect Trump and the Republican Party have picked up in the last 10 years. And so they really highlight those members. And frankly, those members are on the hook for fixing this for their constituents. That's what they got to learn.
Henrietta Treyz, thank you so much for your perspective. Can't say enough. From Louisiana today, which is wonderful. She is with Veda Partners. Every time she's on, I learn stuff I didn't know.
I know.
Every single time. It's just great.
This is the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast. Listen live each weekday starting at 7 a.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. You can also listen live on Amazon Alexa from our flagship New York station. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
This is a joy. And for me and Paul and Lisa and Charlie Pellet, this could literally be a 3-hour conversation. We all fly, our loved ones fly. Stephen Trent is definitive at Citigroup on this. It's not American Airlines Research. It's all of American Research. Thrilled to have you in the studio. Way too short a visit. Let's just get the single best buy. Is it a foreign carrier or a domestic carrier?
Well, thank you so much for having me on, and good morning to you. So, in terms of the carriers we like the most in the United States, it's going to be Delta Airlines is our top pick. We do have American Airlines with a buy rating in our focus group. On a long-term basis, however, within the Americas, Panama's Copa Airlines we think is dynamite.
Copa Airlines out of Panama. What's the play? I know you have a lot of experience covering the transports down in Latin America. Give us just kind of the macro call, because we don't talk about it a lot. How do we think about it from a 30,000-foot level, Latin America transportation?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we look at, for example, the market there versus the market here, I think there are a couple of things I would keep in mind. One of the most important things is the lack of capacity on a per capita basis. So you have, relative to the United States, lower employments per capita. The other thing I would layer on top of that, Latin America airlines, for the most part, of course, generate revenue in local currency and faced U.S. dollar indexed seat mile cost. So they are not long dollar companies. They actually suffer under those circumstances. The third thing I would highlight would be the lack of affordability to fly in Latin America. If you compare the average fare to average weekly per capita income versus U.S. So people that are flying, it's less elasticity.
Are they like us in that they have mileage programs and all the other accoutrements of U.S. airlines, or are they like something back 20 or 30 years where they're just trying to get to the end of the quarter?
Yeah, they're actually somewhat like the U.S. ones, and they are more unbundled than what we have here in the United States. So a full-blown Delta Airlines, for example, is sort of would be sort of an anomaly in many Latin markets.
How are Delta and United and the others competing with government-funded international air carriers like Air France, Qatar, Etihad, and the others buying Formula One billboards?
Yeah, that's kind of a tough place, and that has been sort of controversial at points in the past. So you would be concerned about those issues on the transatlantic, for example. But here in the United States, the model is very good. The airlines here have de-risked their earnings stream through co-branded card, loyalty programs, and the U.S. consumer itself. The demand we see for premium cabin is very good. So we've seen big improvements in earnings quality.
How about some of the budget airlines here? That's a tough business in this country. I'm thinking Spirit and Frontier and all these things. What's going on? How do you run a budget airline these days?
It's tough. I think it's very difficult. And what do you see with the budget airlines today? They're all trying to add premium. And so when we look at this movement to adjust the front of the cabin, are they going to improve unit revenues on that? Yes, they probably will. But if you're a network airline, you're already a unit revenue champion with a strong demand curve. If you're a budget airline, historically, you've never been good at unit revenue. You want to delete the heck out of your seat mile cost. And you can't do that.
But Stephen, Trent, help me here. Like Robert Crandall was a huge supporter of what I was doing, and it was such a joy to have him and Mrs. Crandall up from Florida. He changed what we do, but is it still cyclical? I'm looking at the 10-year track record of Delta Airlines. They've had some challenges like a pandemic, and I'm sorry, it's not good enough total return. Is there a new persistency to cash flow where they're acting like a blue chip stock, or is it another up and down airline cardiac arrest with these stocks?
Yeah, look, so I think relative to 2009 to now, for example, there's a lot that's changed. So the U.S. airlines, for example, do very little synthetic fuel hedging, which I would argue is part of the problem. More importantly, however, the co-branded card piece of the pie is really important. So they're getting cash flow streams from consumers using their credit cards.
Is that more important than Paul sitting on the runway at Newark?
Okay, well, that's a challenge too. Newark has had his issues.
Yep.
But
Terminal A is good though. Boy, they did a good job there.
It sure is.
So all right. So is the business flyer? I know the leisure flyer is back and above pre-pandemic levels. How about the business flyer? What's the new normal? What are the airlines telling you is the new normal for business travel?
Yeah, so I think we're like going back to where we were in terms of those distribution channels kind of getting filled out again. But pre-pandemic business travel, are we going all the way back? I would say no. And that's because in a lot of industries, you no longer have the consumer in the office 5 days a week. So I'm not saying that the fly out Sunday night, fly home Thursday night is gone, but I think it's at least somewhat diminished. And you've seen some of that flow going towards blended travel.
Yeah.
People traveling in, these pre-pandemic shoulder periods.
Single best buy is Delta, right?
Yes, for the
Just
U.S.
very quickly here, how are their lounges doing? Because I can't get into them.
Well, I think those full lounges are a darn good sign of demand. So that's going very well. And the other equipment and infrastructure they have set up for premium is great. I think American Airlines is just getting started with co-branded card. So those are the network carriers. I think
you
those are the
mentioned
ones.
United. I got 30 seconds. What's Kirby doing at United?
I'm a fan of United as well. I think they're doing great. We had them on our focus list. That was some very good performance on the back of it. So we continue to think free cash flow for these network airlines is still spooling up, and the diversity of the free cash flow is no longer coming from just passengers buying tickets. It's coming from co-branded card.
Up 130% this year. Steve whispered in my ear.
Yeah.
You know, did you hear how he said spooling cash flow? You have to go to Tuck to say that.
Yeah,
you can only do that if you go to Tuck up at Dartmouth.
The most loyal
Steve and
alumni
Trent,
base
don't be
ever.
a stranger. Thank you so much.
This is the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast. Listen live each weekday starting at 7 a.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. You can also watch us live every weekday on YouTube and always on the Bloomberg Terminal.
Bloomberg Surveillance, and our front page is the Lisa Mateo Hour. What do you got, Lisa?
Some new Apple tech that's going to be coming out. This is from the Wall Street Journal and Bloomberg. Both are reporting starting next year. They're going to introduce an iPhone that's thinner. So in case you have the one you have, it'll be a little bit thinner. It's intended to be cheaper than the Pro models. So that's a bonus because it's going to have this simplified camera system, and that's reducing their costs. On top of that, foldable devices. That's like the hot new thing. So now they want to plan two. One for a bigger device, one for a smaller device. Bloomberg reporting it's like kind of like an iPad foldable. The problem is that they have to improve the hinge that actually allows it to fold. That's been having some issues. But it's also rethinking the mouse. The next AirTag, you know, those ones that sometimes you put on your luggage, it's going to have a wider range. So it can find things a little bit further away. And then it's going to shift to an in-house Wi-Fi chip.
Really?
All this stuff kind of coming out
Do you
next
use the
year.
AirTag thing?
I don't, but I know a couple people who do, and it's kind of scary because they're tracking
Yeah.
without their knowledge.
Oh, without their knowledge.
They're gonna slip it in someone's bag.
Oh,
like,
I
that's
see.
Not, that's
Okay.
not very
Yeah,
nice.
yeah, yeah.
But no, parents use it on their kids, like on their
Right.
backpacks and
Yep.
stuff.
Yep.
So
Okay.
it's being used a lot.
Okay.
Okay.
Very good. Apple's all
Why
over
do
the
I
place.
need a
have it.
foldable phone?
Just
To be
on
cool.
cutting
Is
edge.
it like
Cutting
kids?
edge.
It's like a kids thing, right?
No, well, no, a lot of adults are using it, but it's the new, like that's the new hot thing. So now they have to adjust to the times, and you know they have to find a tech gadget that's similar to it.
Okay, very good.
I know,
Next,
Apple,
yeah.
new tech.
Yep.
So you've heard about the problems with school districts cutting back on bus service, right? So now parents are turning to rideshare apps to get their kids to school. This was in the Associated Press. It's interesting. It's not Uber and Lyft that we're talking about. It's new startups. One's called Piggyback Network. So parents book the ride for their kids online with another parent traveling in the same direction. So that's the idea of one of them. Another is Hop Skip Drive. So these are all these startups that are beginning because parents are having trouble finding ways to get their kids to school.
Now,
Some
does
have
your
the
town have
luxury.
buses?
We do not. No.
We do not in my town. But presumably for the elementary schools, you lived close by. They had all over
Right.
town, so you live close by, you could walk. That's fine. But then the middle school and the high school, not so much. So you drive by the high school at pickup time, it's a disaster as
Yeah.
all these parents are there lined up. I'm like, where are the buses?
Yeah.
Anyway, all right.
Yeah, no, but that's a problem. So now they're going to these apps. I mean, the
My
question
kids
is
walk
it
home.
safe?
Right.
So they can claim to like screen the drivers, check their fingerprints,
but-
things like that.
But help me here in the suburbs.
Yes.
You know, folks, suburbs for me are 34th Street. In the suburbs, you don't have a lot of Ubers. I mean, if you have a given high school getting out, there's just flat out not enough cars to
And that's
service
why
it.
they're starting these new startups.
Yeah, okay.
These startup apps.
My kids,
some of them
my
are,
kids just walked.
they just walked.
We walked a long way.
Maybe in bad weather we'd go pick them up.
Yeah. I mean, I remember
I used to
going
walk.
I remember going through 2 feet of snow. You know,
Up
my
a
father
mountain.
was evil. No, but, you know, it was like normal that everybody did that.
Yeah, but
Now they got to be, you know, what, you got me a black car and not an SUV? Next.
Oh, gosh. Okay, so if you're not the life of the party, you know, if maybe you're a dull person,
at
Me, look, I'm
definitely
drumming, I
not
can't-
Sweeney.
I'm not.
There is a social club just for those type of people. It is called the Dull Men's Club. The Washington Post has a great article kind of looking into it, that it started back in 1988, but how it's grown. Like it's now includes women. It has like 1.5 million members about posting about their adventures on their Facebook page. So what's an adventure for a dull person? Okay,
Right.
so they collect milk bottles. So they write about that. They take out their trash, what kind of potholes they've seen, what food they've ate. You know, it's the happening place. They even have a calendar that they put out with pictures of their members next to things that they have fun doing.
Okay.
It's a hot seller. It's a hot item.
We get Albert Einstein here
Oh, no.
saying a calm and modest life instead of constant restlessness, like going to see the Eagles at the Sphere.
Boom.
Albert Einstein.
Just book the flights. We're all
You
set.
did.
Yep.
Okay.
I
The
did.
Dull
Mandalay
Men's
Bay.
Club.
We live-
I'm a charter member, right? Thank you. It's good to know that.
We live vicariously through you, Sweeney. Okay, last one. Stick with Hollywood. They're starting to embrace Saudi Arabia. This was in screen time. I'm still kind of going through it. But Lucas Shaw, basically, earlier this month, he went to Jeddah for the Red Sea Film Festival.
Of course he did.
Yes, he did. Vin Diesel, Emily Blunt received awards. Spike Lee, Minnie Driver served on the jury. So Shaw says that Hollywood is starting to embrace Saudi Arabia because you have that pullback in spending across media, entertainment. It's prompting people in search for money in places they never thought of, like Saudi Arabia. Why? Well, there was one thing here. The country's offering incentives, a rebate of about 40% to film in Saudi Arabia. So that's one of the draws there. But they've really been dumping a lot of money. You've had the money going into golf, video game places, building
World
$1.5
Cup as
trillion
well.
futuristic city. So it's starting to grow. So they're saying this might be the new place to start filming movies.
I of course read Lucas the moment it comes out, and there's some Hollywood pushback.
Of course,
Like
of
saying, do
course.
we really want to do this?
Correct.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, money.
That's what it
Yeah,
comes down
exactly.
to.
Let's
You
be
think
honest.
so?
And it's Hollywood, so I mean,
It's Hollywood. You had Johnny
they'll take money.
Depp, Guy Ritchie, like they've, shot projects there. And they say they're going to go
So
So
back.
Johnny Depp is back, right? Is he back to making movies and stuff? I guess.
Johnny Depp? Yeah.
All right, very good.
Okay. Brought to you by Aaron Taylor Johnson. Thank you so much. Craven the Hunter. See it in theaters this week. Only you, Lisa.
Yeah.
She's
big and she goes to the theaters.
Huge.
Yeah.
Did you see pictures of this gentleman?
No, I
All right, so let me.
He's going to Google
what's
up
his name?
Aaron Taylor Johnson.
Aaron. All right, go ahead.
Right.
We'll figure it out.
Craven.
Lisa Mateo on the newspapers. Thank you so much.
This is the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast, available on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Listen live each weekday 7 to 10 a.m. Eastern on Bloomberg.com, the iHeartRadio app, TuneIn, and the Bloomberg Business app. You can also watch us live every weekday on YouTube and always on the Bloomberg Terminal.